Dr. Martin Luther King birthday to everyone.
Happy Martin Luther King Day.
And I hope everybody is having a good day, and I hope all of us take a day to reflect on Dr. King's legacy and where we have come from, because I believe that we have come a mighty long way, but there's still much work to do. If you pay close attention what is going on in many of our communities, we still have a long way to go. But listen, it's something that I have been wanting to do. Just so you know, we are in South St. Louis now, and it has been on my heart for a while. I wanted to do a comparison between North St. Louis and South St. Louis, and I want you to see the difference. And I know many of you know, but some of you probably haven't been to South St. Louis in a while. And South St. Louis is integrated. Now, what percentage of black people live in South St. Louis, I do not know, but the number, I believe, is increasing because many black people are moving to South St. Louis because of the housing. The housing is better and there are more resources. So I do understand. But it's clear that we have a lot of work to do in our community, especially North St. Louis. But what I want to do, I want to drive through some of these communities and I want you to see the difference. Now don't get me wrong, there are some areas in South St. Louis that does need work and improvement, but I would venture to say that when you look at the housing and the resources, the stores, South St. Louis is better. And some areas you go in South St. Louis, you would think that you're in the county. And that's not to say that all the county is good, because there's areas in North County that are bad. In fact, it's just as bad as North St. Louis. But I just wanted you all to see the differences in how things have changed over the years. But what's interesting about it is that many white people are still living in South St. Louis. Unlike a lot of cities have experienced white flight, and a lot of white people have moved into the suburbs. So of course those areas that they moved out of, blacks and Hispanics have moved into. And that's why most of the cities are progressively black. Now many on the right, because the right likes to talk about how bad the cities are, the crime, but they don't talk about the why. Because my brother says, what I want you all to know, there is a direct correlation between poverty and crime. Where you have a lot of crime, a lot of poverty, you're going to have crime. It's just simple math. It's going to happen. And that's not to say that everybody that lives in the city are inherently criminal. I don't believe that. But when you have poor people, there's going to be crime. When you don't have resources, it's going to be crime. When you have schools that are underfunded, you are going to have crime. I wish it wasn't that way. In fact, I wish that resources, schools, were not based on where you live. Your zip code should not determine what type of education you get. It should not determine what type of resources you get. To me, it should be fair and equal across the board. where people at least have the opportunity to succeed. But unfortunately, oftentimes success is based upon where you live. And another thing I just thought about you all, the tax base. Tax base in the city is low. And the reason it's low because families have left, specifically white families have left, and businesses have left. Now that's one thing that's interesting to me. When the white people leave, the businesses follow them. And that's why you have food deserts in North St. Louis. In fact, Snooks has closed one of their stores. One of the stores they closed, which I used to go to for my mother, was the one on West Florissant, near the park. They closed. Now, one could argue the reason they closed, but the fact of the matter is black people spend money. In fact, black people tend to spend more money, but that money does not stay in the black community. It doesn't stay. Unlike other communities, it doesn't circulate and stay in our communities. It goes to other communities, which shouldn't be. And that's one of the reasons why our communities look like they do, because that dollar does not circulate. It goes to other communities where the owners are. Now, what's interesting too, I don't really know, but I want to do a little research, because many of the houses that many of the houses that are in North St. Louis, I don't know if they're rental or they're owned by the black people that live in them. It's something that I do want to do some research on. But I would venture to say a lot of it is rental property. And of course, the people that own them don't keep them up. But I'm going to show you when we get over there. We're still in South St. Louis. I just want you to see, the difference in South St. Louis versus North St. Louis. And what's interesting too, a lot of the white people that work in the city and who are required, as far as my knowledge is concerned, to live in the city, they live in South St. Louis. And some that could afford to live in what is called the Central West End, or basically West St. Louis. But many of the city employees, they live in South St. Louis. They even have a CVS. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a CVS in North St. Louis. There is one? Okay, there is one, thank God. I know there is a Walgreens.
There's Walgreens and CVS. There's a CVS.
Yes. But they even have a Quick Trip. Now, I can tell you right now, ain't no Quick Trip in North St. Louis. And I don't think there ever will be. And I'm sure the corporate at Quick Trip would tell you the reason they won't have one is because of crime. Okay, I get that. But if they wanted to, they can have security, and they got their own security, but they can also have off-duty police officers who would definitely work their secondary to work inside of a Quick Trip. But for whatever reason, they have not made that commitment to have a quick Trip inside of North St. Louis. I just don't think they will. And it's not because there's not plenty of land. The one thing that the city has in North St. Louis is land to build. There's land for housing, there's land for business. In fact, there's land for schools, but it's not going to happen. And we have to be honest, my brother. Much of it is because of racism. We don't like to talk about it, but much of it is because of racism. But the one thing I want you all to understand is one of the reasons why areas look the way they look is because of race and because of redlining, which happened years ago. All you have to do is do the research. In fact, a lot of the housing in North St. Louis was owned by white people who later moved. And black people, for the most part, were relegated to the city, North St. Louis, because of discrimination and housing laws. So when the housing situation changed, many of them were able to move. And guess where they moved? They moved to North County. Some were able to move to U City. But for the most part, most black people moved to North County. As a matter of fact, I could be wrong, but I believe most black people that do live in the county, they live in North County. Much of the area is good. We live in North County, so much of the area is good. But I'm not going to sit up and tell you all of it, because all of it's not. And what I have noticed since we have been living out there, North County has been losing businesses, resources that I believe have, just like it happened in the city, when the white people moved out of North County, the businesses moved with them. Now, what's interesting, and we used to have 2 Deerbergs, now we only have 1. We used to have one in the clock tower. But they closed it down. Even though we didn't shop at Deerbergs a lot, but it was nice to have one, because it's always good when you have more than one grocery franchise. We did a lot of our shopping at Shop and Save. The more you shop, the more you save. As you can see, we're still in South St. Louis. And as you can see, there's a lot of businesses in South St. Louis. Far more than there are in North St. Louis. And far more restaurants, especially sit-down restaurants. In fact, South St. Louis even has a brand new car dealership. That's right, a brand new car dealership. Unlike North St. Louis, where you can only get used cars, and even those cars are not the best quality. You have to be really careful about a car somewhere in North St. Louis. Not that you couldn't find a good one, but I'll just say be very careful because of the quality. Now we're gonna make our way down Kings Highway. We're on South Kings Highway going north. And the one thing I want you to pay close attention is the transition, the change. Once we get to North St. Louis, I want you to see the change, which to me is sad in 2023. Not much has changed. There has been some progress, but still, especially when it comes to housing and business in the great city of St. Louis, not much has changed. And I don't think the powers that be, and even some of the politicians who represent South St. Louis, they don't see the potential of North St. Louis. And they've always tried to make the argument because of crime. And I get it, but still, there's still potential there. Because when you have jobs, when you have resources, you will have a decrease in crime. But if people do not have jobs, they don't have resources, they don't have things to do, guess what? There's going to be crime. And I don't for 1 minute believe that black people are inherently criminal. I don't believe that. Because nobody has a monopoly on crime. Every group, whether they be black, white, Asian, Hispanic, commits crime. But for whatever reason, for the longest, the face of crime is black, and I don't believe in that. But see, I'm always interested in the why, because something happened in our communities where black people are committing a large amount of crime. Because black people don't come out of their mother's womb looking to commit a crime. Because if you look at some of the communities, which I'm going to show you, where they live at, where they go to school at, you'll see why. There's a reason for it. A structure was put in place. Society was never designed for black people to be successful now. Now, you have many on the right would make that argument about the bootstraps, and even some of us, black people who, for whatever reason, decided they about to start drinking the juice of conservatism, would say, you need to pull our boots up. But what if you don't have any boots? Because many of us have been successful in spite of racism, bigotry, and discrimination, not because it wasn't there. And what's also interesting is that people always look at the exception when they talk about what people are doing. They don't ever look at the rule, they always look at the exception. There's always been exceptions. Because believe it or not, after slavery, there was a number of black people that were doing okay. They was able to start a business and did relatively well. But it was not the rule, it was the exception. That's why it's so important that we read and that we learn our history. But I believe Dr. King would not be happy, especially when it comes to housing, employment, incarceration rate. The fact that police brutality is still occurring in our community, he would not be happy. There's no one convinced me otherwise. And I believe he would still be talking about it, protesting, bringing it to the attention of the government. Now, we know the government can't do everything, but the government can set up laws and rules against discrimination in housing and employment. They can let these companies know that if they are not fair and impartial, there will be a consequence. And many of them will not get government contracts. That's why affirmative action was installed, because many of these companies were not fair in their hiring practices. So the government had to put in something in place to ensure that minorities and women are hired. Because it's bad when the government has to force people to do things. But it's true. It's true. But I just believe Dr. King would not be happy at all. I think he would be disappointed. But as they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same, because much of, especially in St. Louis, much of the stuff has changed. It's the same, even though the demographic has changed, because many white people have moved out of St. Louis, and the public schools that are still open, just like this one to my left, VPA, predominantly black. Roosevelt, predominantly black. Cleveland High School is closed. I don't know if they still have Cleveland ROTC, but I believe if it was still open, it'd be predominantly black. And I believe the white people that still live in South St. Louis that are in a position, they send their schools to private school, such as St. Mary's. But they don't send their school. Now, years ago, I'm going to say the early 80s on back, white people were still going to the Southwest, the Roosevelts and the McKinneys. But that changed over time. They moved out, and then the ones who are city employees, they send their kids to private school. So as a result, the schools in South St. Louis, public schools, are predominantly black, because a large number of black people have moved to South St. Louis. You may ask, why have they moved? Because the areas, quite frankly, are better than North St. Louis. The crime rate in South St. Louis is lower. There's still crime in South St. Louis, but it's lower. And you can't really blame nobody for moving, because most people want to live in communities where there's no crime. Most people want to live in communities where their kids could get a good education. It's simple. Okay, we are now going across the Kings Highway Bridge. Not too far from North St. Louis. I'm going to show you the dividing line. We almost hit the dividing line where black people and white people live in big numbers. Right near the old O'Fallon Tech School, which now I believe is O'Fallon STEM School, which I believe is predominantly black to my left, and we just passed another quick trip. Now what's interesting is there's about 3 or 4 quick trips in South St. Louis, and not a one in North St. Louis. I like quick trip. I ain't gonna even lie. And I think the people in North St. Louis would love to have a quick trip. But there is no one. Not a one. And I'm sure Meritus, Shorty Jones, and all the men in North St. Louis would love for a quick trip to make an investment in North St. Louis. But I believe corporate is not interested. And I can only imagine who they've been talking to, who persuaded or discouraged them from investing in North St. Louis. Folks, we are so you're getting close to BJC, Barnes Jewish Hospital, and the Central West End. Now, the Central West End is the area where the upper income yuppies live. I'm sure there's some buppies up in here too, but predominantly yuppies live in Central West End, which is where the most expensive housing is. Now, what's interesting, the Central West End is kind of like the dividing line between North St. Louis and South St. Louis. They're right in the middle. Now, I believe, honey, the people that live in the Central West End are affluent, and they can live anywhere in the St. Louis area. They can live in St. Louis County, South St. Louis County, West County, St. Charles, because of their money and their finances.
Well, you had a sister when she started off as a young professional as a nurse. She lived in the Central West End.
Yep, and it was, I think then, it might have been more affordable, but I don't know. And I think the part of the situation that is closer to North St. Louis might be more affordable. In fact, right now they just built a new apartment building. You can probably see it. A new apartment building in Central West End. Now, I haven't heard about a new apartment building coming up in North St. Louis. Folks, we are getting close to the dividing line. A quick detour Central West End so you can see how much better the communities are than even South St. Louis. And they're building something else over here. I think they're building some other apartment buildings over here. Central West End is very nice. They have restaurants down here. Have a lot of foot traffic between the restaurants and the BJC complex. Very affluent. Now, of course, anybody can come down here and patronize the businesses, but it wasn't really designed for us. But you can come spend your money. But for the most part, to live here is very expensive. So the way they did it, they priced many of us out of being able to live in the Central West End. And the one thing I can say about Central West End, they're steady building. Every time I don't come down here a lot, but every time I come down, it looks like they're building something new, which is good. It's good overall. It's good for the city. I want to see new buildings come up in the city. Because I was born, while I do live in North County, I was born, bred, and raised in the city, and I will always claim it. But I do want to see some buildings, brand new buildings come up in North St. Louis. Businesses, housing, grocery stores. Schools. It's a lot of work to do. know we are on Euclid. And they got apartment buildings and houses in Central West End. I want to see just a little bit of it. And a lot of doctor office buildings are down here. A lot of lawyers. In fact, my lawyer has an office in Central West End. We're almost close to the dividing line, which is Delmar. As you can see, the housing is a little bit different. Even in South St. Louis. People out walking their dogs. Which is how it should be everywhere. You better walk your dog anyway. Okay, I want to give you a heads up. We're getting close to the dividing line. Part of this is still considered Central West End once we pass Delmar. But even in this part, Central West is not as good as the part we just passed. As you get close to Washington Avenue, it's not the same. And it's at this area that you have mostly black people. Now, folks, we are at the dividing line, Delmar. Now, the dividing line is where you have one side that's predominantly black, you have one side that's predominantly white. But in this particular area, Delmar, on this side, you can see there's a shift in resources and businesses. Because it's this part that is considered North St. Louis. Now, as we drive in North St. Louis, I want you to pay close attention to the changes. Changes are not going to be small, it's going to be big. This area of North St. Louis, you can find some sit-down restaurants that are black-owned and operated, which actually is in walking distance of the Central West End. was thinking about doing this, I was reminded how there was a study done years ago. I believe it was the Kerner Commission, where I realized there was 2 United States, one black and one white. And I believe St. Louis was a microcosm of the United States because there's areas in every state, pretty much every state in the union, almost all of them, you have 2 states, 2 cities. Because even when you look at the rural areas, in most states, the rural areas are comprised of mostly white people. The inner cities comprise of mostly black people and Hispanic. Now, as you can see the change now. And I know a lot of this area is looking familiar to you. We are now in North St. Louis. We're going to go through some of these streets because I want you to see. Many of these streets you'll see Fox News on the 5, 6, and 10 o'clock news reporting about a shooting. But they never talk about how these communities got that way. And the reason they don't talk about it is because they don't care. They can create lists. But believe it or not, my brothers and sisters, these areas used to be comprised of white people. Even one of the churches, the burnt out churches, is left. It should have been torn down, but nobody's willing to. And I know the city ain't really got the money, but the people who owned this church, when they sold it, whoever decided to leave, they decided they wasn't interested in spending the money to tear it down. So it's just an eyesore. Unfortunately, there's a lot of eyesores in North St. Louis. And many of these areas, once, believe it or not, folks, was nice. And when you don't have any investment, you don't have any resources, then people move. This is what the results would be. Like I said before, many of these areas was once comprised of mostly white people. So when white flight started, white people moved out and many black people moved into these communities. And unfortunately, many of them were renters, so they were not in a position to maintain them. But trust me when I tell you, black people want nice communities like anybody else. Don't let nobody convince you otherwise. They want to live in nice communities where their kids can play, go outside and ride their bike. I want you to see the difference. That was my main goal. I want you to see the difference. Sure, you can see it already. one of the streets in North St. Louis. I just want you to see the comparison of some of the communities that we drove down in South St. Louis. And of course, there's no comparison in Central Virginia. West side of the city we call the West Side, which is predominantly black, which is still considered North St. Louis. As you can see, it's a lot of work that needs to be done in the North Corridor. And I believe Mayor Deshaun Jones wants to see North St. Louis come up, but she's limited in what she could do. Shoot, look at that thing. I just hope some of the money the city got from the Rams can be vested in North St. Louis. But that remains to be seen. Schools, the Cleveland School, I guess, is still open. Not to say, my brothers and sisters, I don't want anybody to conclude that all of North St. Louis is raggedy or jacked up or however you want to describe it, because not all of it is, but I think it's important to know that much of it is. It didn't just happen overnight. In fact, I believe it was on purpose. Because when you purposely don't invest in the community, it's going to deteriorate. It's going to be raggedy. You're now on Goodfellow. Many people that grew up in the hood know about Goodfellow. watch all of the video. For the sake of time, I didn't really drive in some areas I wanted you to see, but you know, I just want you to see the contrast between North St. Louis, South St. Louis, and part of the Central West Indiana. Now we come into an area of North St. Louis, which I think is actually pretty decent. I want you to see. Pretty sure don't know why people live in this part of the city, North St. Louis. Now, I think there are pockets where you may find white people in North St. Louis. Some of them were unable to get out, and then some of them, they love the idea of living in the city, which I think is good, and I hope most of them see that, you know, North St. Louis has potential. And of course, get the land or even rehab a building, it's pretty much next to nothing, but you got to be willing to invest, spend the money. So like I said, I wish they saw the potential of some areas of North St. Louis, which is, you know, it's close. Go see the Cardinals and the Blues and the zoo and History Museum, you know. And in some of these areas, you have many of the black city employees. Many of them live in this area, I believe, in North St. Louis. I think there are some in South St. Louis, but I think many of them live here, and some of the retired employees who decided, you know, to keep their homes because their homes were paid off. They decided to stay in the city. But I'm sure some who were able to move, they moved. But believe it or not, a lot of the people that live in North St. Louis who are homeowners, they keep their homes up. But you'll never see that on Fox News. They take care of their lawn. Whatever maintenance needs to be done in their home, they keep them up. And they take pride in their homes. But you don't ever really hear a discussion about that. In fact, they take just as much pride as the people in South St. Louis, Central West End, and even people in the county as far as their home. And if you come down in this area during the summer, you will see them cutting their grass, watering their grass. Because they are committed to keeping up their property, keeping up their homes. See some of the homes down here. They're very nice. Many of these homes are considered bungalows. Brick. All brick. As you can see the grass is cut. Even in the winter months, leaves is up. I know, you're surprised. I don't see that on Fox News. They would have you believe that all North St. Louis is raggedy and jacked up, and that's not accurate. It's not accurate. That's why I want to get you video footage so you can judge for yourself. My brother says we just about done. I did want you to see. Like I said, this is something I have been wanting to do. So I think no better day to do it than on Dr. King's birthday, because I want you to see some of the things that he was fighting for. In fact, nobody talks about how he spoke out and fought for equal housing for black people. In fact, he went down to Chicago in the 60s and actually lived in a slum to bring attention to the deplorable conditions that black people were living in Chicago. Because it was everywhere. And I want you to know, my brother and sister, pretty much in every city, you got a North St. Louis. And I can't say St. Louis is the worst. I think there are some cities out there that are far worse than North St. Louis. All right, my brothers and sisters, we are heading to the Review Circle, which is kind of the dividing line between North St. Louis and North County. Review Circle. Alright, my brothers and sisters, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. And I hope that you give me your commentary on it. Like I said, as you can see, there's a lot of work to do in our city. I'm a firm believer, so goes the city, so goes the county. So, you know, as someone who was born and raised in the city, went to school in the city, and I also actually worked in the city, I'm always rooting for the city to be better. And I believe that the city has the potential to be better, but they have to think about North St. Louis. St. Louis will never be as good as it can be until things improve in North St. Louis. All right, my brothers and sisters, take care and continue to enjoy this Dr. King birthday. And like I said, I hope all of you reflect on his legacy, his sacrifice, and what he meant to us. God bless you.